So I'm just going to choose one of the more complicated pieces. Okay, there we go. So you can just open up your exercises. Okay, I'm going to choose the third one. So I did this morning and it takes quite some time. So I'm just going to do the third one, okay? It's roughly the same as the rest. Now, when it comes to hard surface modeling, there's only generally two types of things that you see. Parts that stick out and parts that go in. It's just these two iteration, correct? And of course, holes, which is also going in. So we're just gonna think about how we want to do. Okay, I'll just cut the last one. Okay, how we're gonna cut this thing up. So the very first thing that we need to make sure we have is projection of UV. So this is already with UV. If you want to isolate your object, right, you notice that you rotate and other objects keep blocking your view, for example. You can always select this guy and go up to the top here. There's isolate select. So what it does is it temporarily hides everything else so you can focus on that one thing. And then if you want to get it back, you just click it again. You can even isolate select parts of your object. So if you are modeling, you find that the rest of the parts are blocking your way, right? You can isolate select. Okay, if you want to check on certain things, that's a good way to kind of isolate. Okay, so step number one, do you all remember what you have to do? You have nothing here in your UV editor. So what do you have to do first? Planar, yes. Okay, so I'm gonna go to create. Okay, so all your stuff is all here. Create, cut and sew, unfold, layout. All in a straight line, so you won't forget, okay, what you have to do next. Okay, so if you mouse over your planar, you can see that there's actually a couple of shortcut keys over here, right? Last week I mentioned that. So left mouse button is to use the current setting. Middle mouse is Y-axis. Right mouse button is Z-axis. Shift left click is options. So I'm just going to open my options and I'm going to reset my settings so that I'm back to original. You know how to reset, right? Edit, reset settings, okay? And then the first thing you need to consider is which view gives you the most mileage when you project. Is it here, the top view, the front view, or the side view, right? So considering all three views, I think this one gives me the most mileage, right? Because it gives you the most silhouette. So this is X-axis, the small guy that is looking at us right now. So X-axis is the left mouse button. I'm going to left click on planar. So if you planar wrongly, you can always try the other buttons, see which one you get, right? So planar, and I'm going to get my most mileage here. Next step, what do you have to do? What's after planar? Anybody? What's after planar? Yes, correct. You need to select the edge to cut it so that you create shells, right? So open up cut and sew, the next category. And we're going to use cut and sew, these two. Okay, no, sorry, cut and stitch together. Stitch together means that it will also move the shell. Sew means it simply just move the UV over, so it kind of destroy your shape. The tools, right, I leave you guys to explore. The tools is basically you are supposed to drag the plate, you know, click and drag on the edges that you want to cut, and you instantly cut as you click. So I don't really like this tool too much because there's always a chance that you accidentally click somewhere that you don't want to. So to me, it's kind of hard to control. So I would prefer to just select the edges like what you have already been doing. So I'm just going to select all the circle places. Sometimes pressing 3 and select from there, right? The smooth mode is one of the easiest because you can see all the lines very, very clearly. I'm just going to select all the round places and do a cut. Okay, so top, bottom, left, the thing that's sticking out, I'm cutting it out with the flat surface. And then the thing that's going in, I'm also separating it out with its base. So you want to separate any appendages, anything that's going out or in, you want to cut them out separately. Okay, and plus all the top, bottom. Once you're done, go to UV in your UV editor and start to take apart all your shells. So I should have top, bottom, middle, that is 3 pieces. On the part that's sticking out, I should have 2 pieces. On the part that's going in, I also should have 2 pieces. So a total of 7. Okay. What's the next step after creating all the shells? Unfold. Yes, very good. Okay, so next category. You don't have to submit this exercise, alright? We are just going to quickly go through. It's a quick recap. So don't worry too much if you are not catching up. Okay, you want to unfold every single piece. It's safer to do it piece by piece because sometimes certain things will disappear and you might not realize it. Okay, now if you notice that you unfold the rings, right? It's going to give you a very strange look like this. Okay, and number 1, if you want to paint, it's going to be really hard. Number 2, it's really not unfolded optimally. If you look at the checker map, okay, so you just expand your window, turn on the shaded mode. Shaded mode is the second button, right? Turn on the checker map and turn off the display in your editor. Right, so you basically turn on a checker map but you don't see in your editor, you see in your scene. So if you look at your scene, right, the faces on the side is totally like, it's not straight, it's kind of like warping and bending. Even over here, it's not so obvious, but it's also kind of bendy. Over here is kind of bendy, right? So we need to keep it straight. We know that if we cut a straw vertically, it's going to open up like a rectangle. So cannot be that you see something like this. Okay, it means that we haven't cut a line across. So what we can do is we can choose an edge to cut across. So for example, you might want to choose the best place. If you're not sure where to cut, right? Usually I like to select around the area and then I look at my editor. So it's around here. So I'm going to just select the edge here. Or you can do it in your editor, it's up to you. And I want to cut. After you cut, unfold again, you should get a perfect rectangle. And this will make a lot more sense and a lot cleaner in your checker map, right? Now I haven't introduced a cylindrical projection yet, correct? So sort of briefly mentioned last week, we have been using planar for a lot of our work, and most of the time it should not have any problems. But remember last week our cube that we tried to unfold, and then some of them became like so small. It's a cube, right? It's supposed to be easy, and it became so small you cannot even see. So we had to project them individually, correct? That was what happened. So in the event, right, that your cylinder cannot unfold properly, that means it disappears after you unfold, we can always use a cylindrical mapping. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select, let's say, right, let's say that all these guys here are having some issues to unfold. Okay, this set of UVs. So I'm going to use something called cylindrical because it's round. It's perfect for that kind of mapping. So under create, back in create again. So instead of using planar to project, right, we can always use something called cylindrical. So I'm going to click. So make sure, right, you choose the faces here. Which one is it? It is the one that is sticking out. Okay, and then I'm going to click on cylindrical. So select the faces, click on cylindrical, and you're going to see something like this, which is not very helpful. And you can see even in your view, right, it looks like a planar mapping, correct? But it's bent. Okay, you can see that? Oh, this is even worse, cannot even see a thing. Better? Okay, so you can see a planar map, but it is bent like a cylindrical object. So what we want to do is to rotate this guy so it faces the correct direction. So how do you rotate him? Actually, all the squares here are for you to change the size of your cylindrical mapping, and you can see the feedback. Okay, that it tries to map it into this box here, but it's not important. Usually I don't even touch the boxes unless you really want to shape it, but yeah, something that I don't use very often. What I use more often instead, right, is this T shape. It's very small. I don't know why they make such a small thing there when it's so important. If you click on it, it's gonna open up a gizmo. Okay, and this gizmo helps you to rotate your cylinder. So how do you use this gizmo? Remember, if you were to click on the, I'll try and turn it on again. Yeah, so this is what you see, right? If you want the rotation, you need to click on the blue line. If you want to scale it, you need to click on the square to activate it. Okay, so this is scale mode. If I click on the arrow, it's move mode, so the center changes. If I click on a circle, the rotation will come out. Right? So you need to activate the correct gizmo. So once I click on the circle, I can start to rotate my cylinder, and you can see in your feedback here. Let's try and fit everybody in here. At first it was like this, right? So once you rotate it so that the side is projected properly, you can technically almost unfold your stuff on the spot. Alright. Obviously you might not be accurate, it can be a bit bent, it doesn't matter. You just want to focus on doing most of the work through projection, and then finally you do an unfold. Okay, I think it's best to try and get it right. So it's up to you whether you want to choose the planar projection or you prefer to do cylindrical mapping. Both are okay. And I would say to start with planar first because it's easier. And then if you meet with any problems with planar, right, then you cylindrical project some parts. Oh, weird. It's weird that it's performing this way. Okay. So the next one, the last ring that is going in, this part belongs to here. Okay. So obviously you can cylindrical map, or in our case I'm just going to cut and open it up. So you just want to select the edge where you can hide it the most, like nobody sees. Usually the top, right, nobody will see it. So I'm gonna select roughly around the area. What you can do is you can select one, right, and then you find it in your editor, and then you just select the rest and cut and unfold. Okay, with that we have all our parts unfolded, and this is what you should have in your view. Okay, more or less you get it. So we are done with review. What we're going to do next is to start to pack them and get them ready for Photoshop. So shall we move to one of the shapes that we have already done? Okay, let's go to our cylinder. Okay, so guys, let's go to our cylinder right now, and we are going to start to get them ready for Photoshop. So in Photoshop, right, we are technically only painting a specific area in our grid. Now if you zoom out, you can see that your grid is really huge and it has many like squares. Alright, but technically we want to make sure that all our shells are packed into a 0 to 1 U, 0 to 1 V, just this box only. It is very strange why you have so much space, but we can only pack it in here. So this is one of the more weird rules, I would say, in UVs. Okay, in Maya itself, you can actually tile your texture or place different sets of texture in different boxes, and you can create different types of painting work all over. So it's meant for like I believe for sculpting and things like that. You can actually use more than one tile or more than one box. But when it comes to working with another program like your game engine and things like that, right, game engines only use the basic tools from Maya, because ultimately they're different programs, so they don't fully match up. And the purpose of Maya in a game production, right, is basically just to build your game assets. Majority of the stuff that you do will be in your game engine itself, where you program, where you make sure that things are scaled to the right size or placed in the right place. So the assembly of your game takes place in the game engine. So Maya is just a tool for you to create stuff, that's all. So we will stick to the basics, because only the basics can transfer properly into let's say a game engine like Unity. All the advanced tools in Maya are actually meant for animation. So if you are gonna do like TV production or film, right, yeah, then you'll start to learn all the more advanced stuff. So for now, Unity only accepts texture in the first tile, which is here. Okay, so you cannot put anywhere else. So we're gonna learn how to pack them in. You might think, oh, easy one, I just like scale lor. Right? But if you have many parts and many pieces that you want to pack, let's say your rocket, right? You have the booster, you have this and that. So you have a couple of items that you actually want to pack into this guy. It's going to take you forever, and you might not even know if the size is proportionate or not. That means the checkered map, right, might be different size. Even within, let's say my cylinder itself, you can see that the checker map is smaller here and is bigger at the sides. So if let's say you were to put a decal or a sticker across, right, the corner, it's going to look really big and pixelated here, and it's going to look very small and sharp. So you're going to get different resolution because you're packing different number of pixels into that same space. So over here you have such a large area compared to like the rest of the shelf. So we're going to use something called layout, which will do the job for us. So we just let the computer calculate what's correct. So can you open up arrange and layout, and we're just going to use the default settings. Okay, and click layout. So select all your UVs. You have to be in UV mode. Select all your UVs and then click layout. So instantly it's gonna pack it in, right? So default is working pretty well, but first problem that we have is that we know that the circles are supposed to be the same size, but it isn't, correct? And checker map is very obvious, they are different. So we're going to edit the settings in layout to make sure that it's doing a better job. So shift and click on your layout, shift left click, it's going to open up settings, and you should be in your unfold 3D. Everybody have unfold 3D? There's a chance, right, that your unfold 3D will turn off itself. Okay, so even if you don't have a problem today, you might have a problem tomorrow or tonight. So what happens is that Maya sometimes will start up and forget to load up some of the plugins. So it's a bit strange, but it does that all the time. Okay, so Unfold 3D is actually a plugin. Plugin means it's like an external program, mini program that they put into Maya itself to enhance it. So even Photoshop, you have a lot of plugins that you can get, okay, from third party. It can be free, it can be paid. So all these things sometimes can automate some of the stuff that we do. So if you don't have Unfold 3D, right, you're going to write down somewhere. Okay, because if you rely on a video by week, I don't know, week 10, you notice that you have like hours and hours of video, and you want to find this one thing, you have to scan through hours of video just to look for it. Okay, so just write down under Windows, Settings and Preference, you have something called the Plugin Manager. So now and then you have to go back into this guy because he tends to turn things off. Okay, so Windows, Plugin Manager, and there's a lot of tabs, so I'm not going to tell you which tab is going to be in because it's all path, okay, so it wouldn't make much sense. But you want to look for something called Unfold 3D Bundle. Okay, so make sure that it's loaded and auto load, and when you click on refresh, your Unfold 3D should appear again. Right, so if you have anything missing, like if you want to export your 3D into another program, right, and you find that the export settings is missing a certain file type, again, it's your plugin manager's problem, right? Okay, so Unfold 3D, let's make sure that the shell prescaling is changed to preserve 3D ratio. So what this does is it looks at the shape of your object, and it tries to scale all your shells proportionately to each other. There's actually a UV ratio as well. So if you read the documentation, right, 3D ratio means it looks at the size in 3D space. UV ratio means that it looks at the shell in UV space. But honestly, when I try both of them, right, I don't really see much of a difference. So both of them, it doesn't matter which one you choose. But if one isn't working, right, then you try the other. So for certain special shapes or certain special situation, you might find that maybe 3D doesn't work very well. So you might want to go for UV. So just play around with these two settings. So I'm going to turn this on for pre-scaling. And I'm going to click on apply again. So apply means that you keep the window open, but you apply your settings. So once you do that, right, you notice that your shell has resized itself. Now if you don't have this issue, right, just take one of your shell, scale it up obscenely big, okay, compared to the rest, and then give it a go. You can see it tries to conform. And all your checker maps will be perfect. See that? Okay, so you want your checker map to be as squarish as it possibly can, as straight as it possibly can, so that when you paint in Photoshop, you don't get too much distortion. Okay, so looking great. We have another problem. You notice that your shells are touching each other. So when you go into Photoshop and you start painting, right, you're going to get a lot of problems. Remember as kids, right, they always tell us, hey, color within the line, right, and don't go out. So if we can't even do that properly as kids, right, I think this will drive us crazy, okay? So we need a little bit of gap between them. Okay, so it makes our life a bit easier. So back in our settings here, if you find that your shells are diagonal, right, just visually try to straighten it, or you have this button called straighten shell. Okay, so you can actually use this to straighten your shells if it's slanted. So usually I'll manually kind of straighten my shells with either the button or I will rotate it myself. I wouldn't do it in layout, because sometimes layout doesn't know exactly where you want. Do you want it vertical or horizontal? It doesn't know. So I will just keep it turned off. So layout settings, we need some space, right? So you need to make sure that you choose the correct map size. There are actually a couple of common ones that we use for games. So 1K map, we don't usually call it 1024. Okay, we call it 1K map in the industry, and this will be this will be considered 2K, and this is 4K. So if someone tells you I need a 4K map, right, you don't give him a 4000 resolution. Give him a 4096. Okay, so you need to understand, kind of understand like the speech in the lingos that are being used in Office. Okay, so we're going to use 1K map. 1K is standard for game characters. Okay, for let's say props or objects that are really small and far away and your character will never touch it, right? You might want to drop down to 256 or 512. Do you know how the numbers come about? Like how do you calculate numbers like that? Ratio? What ratio? Screen ratio. No. Do you notice that your what thing applies now? I can't talk about thumb drive because thumb drive is no longer 512. The speed of your hard disk, yeah, speed of your hard disk or the speed of your graphic card and all that. You notice that the numbers are very specific. It's always the same, right? These are called binary numbers. So it's kind of like, I believe it came from your computer bits, the 1010 thing, right? Yeah, if you're curious, you can go and read about it. So anyway, numbers in computers basically comes in like square, means like 2 times 2, 4 times 4, something like that. Okay, so it always adds onto itself. So we have numbers that start from 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 1 to 8, 1 to 5. So it adds itself up. So if you don't know what is the next number, for example, 1K map, right? You know what's 1K. And then someone tells you, I need a 2K map. So all you need to do is just add to itself, right? You'll get the next number. Okay, so these are for smaller props, and this is for characters. So you always want to check in your game, right? Does your object look very small? Does it look very pixelated if I use a too small a map, or you know, or can I just, or is the map too big and I need to I can reduce some more. So these are always the consideration when you're building games. Can you save on resources? Is too much, like too much, right? Okay, and then 2K is meant for like TV production. So if you are painting textures for TV shows, right, like cartoons, Cartoon Networks and things like that, you are using 2K for characters, for props. 4K is for movie. And usually 4K, right, they use it like as part of a character. So let's say the face area is 4K, and then the arm is another 4K, you know, that kind of thing. So they actually break it down. So in total, the character can be like, I don't know how many different maps going on. So that's for movie, because they have a lot of resources. They can go very high end, right? So let's choose 1K, and I want to, let's set a padding of 10. Padding means spacing, okay? So between the shells, I want to have 10 pixels. Click on apply, and you can see it shift a little bit. So it looks a bit too near, so I'm just going to set to 25 and shift some more. You don't want too big a gap, okay, but you also don't want them to be too close. So I have something like this. This is great. Another issue is that it's too close to the edge of the texture, right? So same thing, if any textures are too close, sometimes Maya will have a glitch, and then it will not read the textures that are right on the edge. So you want to have some tile padding as well. Okay, so I'm just going to add a tile padding of 25. So it kind of give it more breathing space around the map. So once you have that, we are good to go. Okay. So make sure you have your UVs laid out this way. Have some space between the shells. Make sure they are all blue, right? And make sure that the checker maps looks okay. The squares are the same size. There's no crazy distortion. So once you're done with that, it's time to take it out to Photoshop to start painting. So let's go to image. Okay, and choose UV snapshot. Okay, image UV snapshot. By the way, if you don't have the UV toolkit, right, you realize that it's actually not there. You can turn it on under tools. Okay, you can hide UV toolkit or show UV toolkit. It's all there. Okay, so I'm gonna click on UV snapshot, and it's gonna bring up a window here. First thing you need to do is again to set the size. So just now the size that we set is so that they can calculate the spacing. Okay, between, you know, we do the tile padding and shell padding, right? They need to know what is the size of the texture map that you're going for, so they can calculate the space between them. But in UV snapshot, you are really creating the size. So if you get this wrong, right, you bring it out to Photoshop, the size is actually going to be different. So make sure you set 1K, and we want to change the image format to PNG. PNG means it's transparent, so we only see the lines. And okay, hang on a moment. Do you notice that your project is under projects, default, images, blah blah blah, right? It means that we haven't set a project for our scene yet, so it's trying to save somewhere obscure in your Maya default folder, right? So let's just set a new project so that all the external pictures can be put into that same folder, and then when you pass it on, the links will not be broken. So let's close this and let's go to File. And there's two things, right? Project window and set project. So project window is to create a new project. Set project is when you want to open something up. Then you need to set the project first. So let's look at the first one, project window. So we have already done this in lesson 1, so it's a quick recap. Okay, so I'm going to click on new and I'm going to give this a project name, student number. So project is just a folder, okay? So your number, your name, let's do week 3 UV basic shapes. Okay, you can go ahead and choose your location. I'm just going to choose it on my desktop as usual. Right? Okay, and then choose accept. So we have only created the folders, but we haven't saved our scene yet. Okay, so inside our scenes folder is still empty. So let's do a save scene. So file, save scene as. Save scene as means that you're saving in a different location, okay? So save scene as, and you must make sure that it takes you straight to your scenes folder in your project. Okay, so once it defaults there, we can call this 01 UV layout. Okay, make sure you save as Maya ASCII. Right, so I'm going to show you how to set your project, okay, when you open Maya for the first time. For example, right, if your friend were to give you a project that you need to open, or you want to open your project on an iMac, for example, so a place where you've never opened it before, or even you want to open a previous project that you've been working on, okay, which is different from the one you have right now. So all these things, right, you need to set project first before you open your scene. If you open your scene first, right, chances are you cannot see your texture. Your textures all will be broken. Okay, but if you set project and then you open your scene, right, it will find all the links in your separate folders. So the first thing you need to do is file and then set project. And you need to look for the folder itself. So let's say my folder is student number, whatever, right? So all you need to do is just select the project folder. You don't have to go in. You just need to select the folder itself will do. Okay? So just the folder itself, click on set, and then you open your scene. Alright, once you open your scene, you should be able to see your textures showing. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so what were we doing? We're doing snapshot, right? So now that we have our project settled, when we do a snapshot, Maya is going to default to that location there. Okay, so let's see how that works. So image UV snapshot, make sure the size is correct, image format is correct. I'm going to click on browse. In fact, right, if you take a look here, it's already been set properly to the images folder. So over here, images, I want to give it a name. So I'm going to call this cylinder underscore UV. It's always good to come up with standard naming conventions. So for things like UV snapshot, I like to put an underscore UV at the back. So when your files get plentiful, right, you straight away know which one is actually UV snapshots and which one are texture maps. So always have something like behind to kind of describe what you're doing. So some companies, they have naming conventions for you to follow, but a lot of times when you're working on all these work in progress files, right, these are all your own things that nobody else will see. So it's good that you have your own way to name things, so at least you know what is what. And it's a standard convention that you always follow. Okay, so I have a cylinder UV and I press save. And everything is there, okay, images, blah, blah, blah. Click OK. And that's it. So if you go to your folder right now and you look at your images folder, you should see the cylinder PNG being saved up. Okay, if not, then you haven't done the snapshot yet, you need to do it. So there is actually another folder called source images and images, right? These two sounds almost the same. So what is the difference between images and source images? Images comes out of Maya. So anything that you generate from Maya itself is going to get thrown into the images folder. Like for example, your UV snapshot is going to default there. Source images, on the other hand, comes from you. So you produce images that you want to put into Maya. For example, textures that you paint, right? Everything will go into source images. Maya is going to go there and look for it. Okay? Anything that comes out is images. Anything that comes from you is source images. Got it? So once you have this, feel free to open up in Photoshop CC